So you may think we're in a jungle somewhere, but we're in fact in a woodland in the south of England. And you've got to imagine places like this, like 500 years ago or so, could well have had big packs of wolves that could, chase you and eat you, if not do you some serious damage. And that just isn't the case anymore. I mean, in some parts of the world, it really is a big deal, and human-wildlife conflict, which is the title of this film, is a serious issue to a lot of people. I mean, in the UK at the moment, what have we got that's genuinely dangerous? Well, you can kind of think maybe some of the big red deer stags that you get in managed areas like Richmond Park. They're genuinely quite dangerous during the rutting season in September. They all say that cows are more dangerous than bulls. I remember getting chased by a few cows when I was a kid, quite often actually, but that doesn't really happen anymore, and frankly no one goes to bed at night thinking, I'm genuinely concerned about a run-in with a cow in the morning. That just doesn't really happen. Ain't nobody got time for that. Tripping over a tree root. Anyway, to get a real sense and a real flavour about how big a deal this issue is in other parts of the world, you have to go somewhere a little bit more tropical. And that's exactly what we're going to go and do now. I'm climbing up a huge hill, which is why I'm so knackered. And a word of warning, this is where I put on my kind of slightly more formal BBC voice. And we have a nice little documentary all about human-wildlife conflict. Anyway, to cut to the chase, I hope you enjoy the film. The Western Ghats Mountains, running down the southwest coast of India, are one of the top 10 hotspots for biological diversity in the world. With close to 50 natural UNESCO World Heritage Sites, it's likely that many undiscovered species lie in the Western Ghats. But with a rapidly developing country like India, areas such as here, in Nagarahole, are under increasing pressure from humanity. However, given the size and power of some of the wildlife that roams here, it's not just nature that can feel threatened, but also rural societies too. This is especially the case for tribal areas, and is increasing as the government continues its conservation efforts, bringing back species from the brink of near extinction, but not always planning for the adverse interaction with local communities. But what does this phrase human-wildlife conflict really mean? I spoke to local naturalist and expert Shashank Chah.
So when we talk about the human-wildlife conflict, most of the people think human-wildlife conflict in a wrong way to say. They think only when a wild animal attacks a human, then only it will be a human-wildlife conflict. But if you look into the definition of a conflict, it says if a human and an animal resources overlaps each other, then it says we can say it as a human-wildlife conflict. Example, elephants destroys the fields is a human-wildlife conflict, or a tiger attacks a human. Anything comes into the human-wildlife conflict. If you see here in the Nagarahole National Park, there is no buffer zone for the park. So basically, if you go into the definition of a buffer zone, the buffer zone is a small area between the national park and the villages, so that it can separate the animals from the villages to enter into the villages. So there is no buffer zone for the park, and if you look into the highway, there's a state highway running through the park too.
So the premise is pretty straightforward, but what about some of the problems that local people are actually experiencing? This massive lake behind me was actually man-made in the 1970s in order to create a new national park that you can kind of see over there. And there used to be a village located over there that's now been relocated on the other side of the lake in that direction. And I'm going to go and take a boat over there this morning to chat to a few villagers to see if they still have problematic run-ins with big wildlife.
ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಗೌರಿ. ಆವಾಗ ಬಾಳೆ ಒಂದು ಹೀಗೆ ಬೇರೆಯವ್ರನ್ನ ಕೊಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬಾಳೆ ಹಾಕಿವಿ. ನಮಗೆ ನೀರಿಗಿರೊಂದು ಇಲ್ಲ, ಬೋರ್ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಈ ಆನೆ ಬಂದು ಗೊನೆ ಬಿಡೋ ಸರ್ಕ ಇದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಮುರಿದಾಕ್ಬಿಡ್ತು, ತಿಂದು ಮುರಿದು ಹಾಕ್ಬಿಡ್ತು. ಆಮೇಲೆ ನಮಗಿಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರೂ ಇಲ್ಲ, ನಮ್ಗೆ ಗುಣಸರು ಇತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ, ಆಚೆ ಕರ್ಗೆ ಹೊಂಟೋಗಿದ್ರು. ಆವಾಗ ಬೇರೆಯವ್ರನ್ನ ಕರ್ಕೊಂಬಂದು ಅಡ್ಕೆ ಮಾಡಿ ಓಡಿಸ್ತು ಆನೆನೆಲ್ಲ. ಅವ್ರು ಅಡ್ಕೆ ಓಡಿಸಿದ್ರು.
Elephants can permanently damage trees, meaning that real long-lasting damage can occur frequently. This is a serious problem for communities where there is a lot of subsistence farming, and each year over 500,000 families in India are impacted in this way. Furthermore, in trying to protect their crops, Up to 400 people a year die from being trampled by elephants, and 100 elephants also die in retaliation killings. The thing is though, it's not just these beasts that are involved in human-wildlife conflict. The big cats that roam here mean that farmers and livestock are threatened too. Could you tell me a little bit about your sort of run-ins with animals that you've had quite near your house and kind of what you've done about it?
ಸರ್ ಇವಾಗ ಒಂದು 10 ವರ್ಷದಿಂದ ನಾವು ಈ ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ವಾಸ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದು. ಈ ಲೆಪಾರ್ಡ್ ಬಂದು ನಾವು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಗೋಟ್ನ ಕಟ್ಟಾಕಿದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು 10-10:30 11 ಗಂಟೆ ಅಷ್ಟೊತ್ತಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಗೋಟ್ನ ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೊರಟೋಗ್ತಿತ್ತು. ಆವಾಗ ನಾವು ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಬಂದು ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಆ ಗೋಟೆ ಇರ್ತಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಆವಾಗ ಫಾರೆಸ್ಟ್ ನಾವು ಫಾಲೋ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊ ಹೋದಾಗ ಅದು ಫಾರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಹೊರಟೋಗ್ತಿತ್ತು.
ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಸರಸ್ವತಿ ಅಂತ. ನಾವು 3 ರಾಸುಗಳನ್ನು ಸಾಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದು. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ 5:30-6 ಗಂಟೆ ಹತ್ರ ಚಿರತೆ ಬಂದು ಕರೋನಾ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ದೊಂದು ರಾಸನ್ನು ಹೊತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೊಂಟೋಯ್ತು. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಈ ರೀತಿ ಕಟ್ಕೊಂಡೀವಿ. ಇದರಿಂದ ಈ ಕಟ್ಟೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ತೊಂದರೆ ಇಲ್ಲ.
Leopards can and do take livestock, but rarely go for men. Tigers, on the other hand, are a different story. Later on in the afternoon, I was chatting to a man called Ganesh, who had a gruesome and first-hand experience. So this is your friend?
Friend. ಬಿಟ್ಟೋದ್ಮೇಲೆ ನಮಗೆ ಅದ್ರ ಪ್ರದೇಶದಲ್ಲೇ ಇರೋದು. ಅದಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ನಮಗೆ ಏನಂದರೆ 7 ಗಂಟೆ 8 ಗಂಟೆಗೆ ಬೆಳಿಗ್ಗೆನೇ ಹುಲಿ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ನಾವು ಬೆಳಿಗ್ಗೆ ಒಂದು ಏನಾದ್ರು ಬಾತ್ರೂಮ್ಗೆ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು 10 ಮೀಟ್ರ್ ದೂರ ಹೋದ್ರೆ ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಹುಲಿ ಇರ್ತವೆ. ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಹುಲಿ ಹಿಡಿದು ನಮ್ಮ ಫ್ರೆಂಡ್ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ತಿಂದಾಕಿ ಒಂದು 100 ಮೀಟ್ರ್ ದೂರಷ್ಟು ಎಳ್ಕೊಂಡೋಗಿದೆ. ಎಳ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಫಾರೆಸ್ಟ್ನವರು ಎಲ್ಲ ನಮ್ಮಂಥವ್ರ ಜೊತೆಯವರು ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಂಡುಹಿಡಿದು ಆ ಹುಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಓಡಿಸ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಪುನಃ.
Disturbing as this story is, it's not unusual in some parts of the country. India has nearly 70% of the world's tiger population, and the numbers are increasing yearly thanks to a successful government conservation program stretching back to 1973. Staggeringly though, India's human population has more than doubled since the early 1970s, and the competition for shared resources, especially on the borders of national parks, has increased dramatically. And it's this that's driving the human-wildlife conflict here. But if wildlife conservation is going to continue to succeed in India, it's local people that the government have to keep on side. And this is something that's difficult to achieve, especially if the right policies are not put into place to prevent people carrying out retaliation killings.
ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ ಇಲ್ಲಿ?
ಈಗ ನಾವು ಕ್ಯಾಟಲ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಕಟ್ಟಾಕಿರ್ತೀವಿ. ಟೈಗರ್ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಅಟ್ಯಾಕ್ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತದೆ. ಅದು ಒಂದು ಕ್ಯಾಟ್ಲ್ ಬೆಲೆ 30,000 35,000 ಇರ್ತದೆ. ಆದರೆ ಸರ್ಕಾರ ನಮಗೆ ಬರೀ 5,000 ರೂಪಾಯಿ 5,000 rupees ಮಾತ್ರ ಕೊಡ್ತಿದೆ. ಇದು ನಮಗೆ ಭಯಂಕರ ಲಾಸ್ ತೊಂದರೆ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ.
Like there are a couple of incident happens in North India. If you go through any websites, you will get to know. Like a leopard came into a village and the whole villagers, like around 100 people, was trying to kill a leopard rather than going inside and shutting the doors.
So as well as kind of population, are there other things that are impacting human-animal conflicts, and would you say that are there kind of measures that can be taken to kind of help prevent this sort of going forward?
Basically is the education is the best thing to say, because if you educate the locals, if you educate the people, it's much better, because they are the one who supports the wildlife. If they want to destroy the park, it's a seconds of matter for them. If they want to prevent the park, it's a seconds of matter again to them. So it's basically the education changes everything.
It was near the end of the day and time to head back across the water. I'd only been in the village a short while, but I could already see what a big deal human-wildlife conflict was to people here. India has taken conservation very seriously. 50 years ago, there were just 5 national parks. Today, there are well over 100, along with other kinds of protected areas such as biosphere reserves, wildlife sanctuaries, and plans for many more. The thing is, if wildlife and people are to live together harmoniously, it's the preventative strategies to the conflict that are needed, rather than just reactive ones. More recently, solar-powered electric fences, anti-poaching camps, and other measures have been put in place to try and help. However, for a problem that is set to get worse and worse, a major rethink is needed. The Western Ghats are even older than the Himalayas, and one of the world's most important places for wildlife and biodiversity. It needs to be kept that way for future generations. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned a bit more about human-wildlife conflict. I certainly really enjoyed making it. Anyway, that place, Nagarahole National Park, absolutely incredible. I'd really recommend going there. It blew my mind. It was just amazing. The abundance of wildlife all in one place was just staggering. And I've been lucky enough to be a game driver on a safari park in Southern Africa quite a few years ago. And that was incredible, like an amazing experience. But I never quite saw the density of animals all in one place as I saw in Nagarahole, and it was just amazing because you don't normally think of India as being a place to go and do that, or some people don't anyway. I certainly underestimated it. And that place was only about 2 hours away of where we were meant to be. We were kind of in there on holiday and also visiting some family as well that live only a couple of hours away. So it was kind of amazing that it was almost right on their doorstep. And I'd really recommend going there as well because it's really cheap to actually go there and see the wildlife. Sometimes it can be a bit prohibitively expensive, but it's really good value because it's run by the government and it's run pretty well. And you also tend to be not surrounded by too many Western tourists. You tend to be, there are tourists there, but they tend to be Indian tourists, and that just gives it quite a nice feel compared to being surrounded by just loads of people from your own country. And the second thing I wanted to speak about was all about how you make a short documentary like that. So the proper way of doing it is to research your topic hugely in advance and spend ages and ages and ages compiling all sorts of things about all the different issues, and it takes forever. And that's a great way of making a documentary. You can make some really quality pieces like that. This, on the other hand, I found out about human-wildlife conflict. I had absolutely no idea really what it was properly about beforehand. Well, I did a little bit, but I had no idea how much of a big deal it was the day before I shot it. So, I noticed that when I was in Nagarahole, some of the villages were really close up to the border of the park. And I just remember speaking to a few guys there, having a little bit of a chat. And one guy in particular introduced me to a few other villagers. And, we kind of built up a bit of a rapport with them. And they agreed to, share their experiences on camera. And which obviously is an amazing thing. It's a real privilege to be able to kind of film that. Also feels really great when someone's just sharing an experience on camera. That's one of the buzz of filmmaking, really. Anyway, and then I kind of shot all the B-roll and the interviews the next day after I'd found out that this was an issue for these people here. So it was just instantaneous almost. Very little planning whatsoever, but that was kind of the fun of it. And then obviously there was all the wildlife shots as well that kind of fed into it. And then you tend to get all that stuff, bundle it all together, look at it in loads of detail, decide which one is really great, which one you really want to keep, and you kind of cut the kind of wheat from the chaff, so to speak. That's a bit cliche, sitting next to a wheat field, but whatever. Normally about a 10-to-1 keep to cut ratio. There's a little plane going over. And then you kind of lay it out all on a timeline, on an editing timeline, and then you just kind of piece it together a little bit like a jigsaw, and then the story kind of emerges from there, really. And that's a really fun way to make a documentary. Obviously, I don't recommend that people making a very serious documentary do that all the time, because it should involve a lot of planning and very careful shot selection and everything else. But if you're in the moment and you're in a certain place and a certain time, there's something happening, you can the film that I made shows you that you can just make a documentary if you really want to. Just shoot some interviews, shoot some B-roll, stick it on a hard drive, forget about it, and realise that you can make something and just have the confidence to go and make stuff. Anyway, I'm going to stop gabbling on now, and thanks once again for watching, and I will see you next time.